Between 2010 and 2026, during my years in metabolic research and clinical diabetes practice, I personally analyzed nearly 9,000 individual continuous glucose monitor curves and fasting insulin profiles. That's nearly 9,000 times looking directly at the real-time cellular energy dynamics of the human body. 9,000 chances to notice patterns that most people never even hear about. And what I want to share with you today isn't meant to scare you at all. It's meant to inform you and ultimately to empower you. Because a daily blood sugar reading isn't just a number on a plastic meter, it's a window into how someone's cells have been processing energy, often for decades. I'm Walter Berg, and it's time to take a closer look inside. Let's start with the baseline. When analyzing a metabolically healthy individual, a normal glucose graph looks like a calm, rolling hill. The fasting baseline sits steadily between 70 and 85 milligrams per deciliter. Post-meal rises are small, smooth, and gentle, never breaching 110 before slipping quietly back to baseline within 2 hours. The cellular walls are highly receptive. Insulin is secreted in tiny, elegant amounts, clearing glucose effortlessly without creating a hormonal storm. When I saw that on a chart, I thought, this metabolism is being treated well. A healthy insulin response looks incredibly efficient. But I have to be honest, a person can look very healthy on the outside, but not so healthy on the inside. Once you know what true metabolic health looks like, the contrast becomes hard to ignore. And that's where one of the most sobering patterns of my career began to emerge. I kept seeing severe insulin resistance in younger patients, people in their early 20s, people my age, people who looked lean, felt energetic, and lived full lives. In the medical community, routine type 2 diabetes screening traditionally doesn't even cross a doctor's mind until a patient hits 45 or exhibits obesity. But metabolic dysfunction is skyrocketing in younger populations, and that's no longer controversial. That's established epidemiology. So when I analyzed a metabolic profile in someone under 35, often for vague symptoms like afternoon fatigue, brain fog, or stubborn abdominal weight, and I found massive hidden insulin spikes, honestly, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. You see, chronic insulin spikes have the potential to permanently burn out the pancreas. But when caught early, this cellular numbing can be completely reversed. And now that metabolic strain is gone, and whatever chronic condition it might have become, it won't. Now, large population studies support our concerns about metabolic decay shifting to younger populations. A landmark analysis published in major endocrine journals showed that adults born around 1990 have double the fasting insulin levels and a significantly higher baseline risk of early-onset metabolic syndrome compared to their parents' generation born around 1950. These were not people who looked sick. They looked invincible. That's one of the hardest lessons I learned. Insulin resistance is a silent disease. It begins quietly at the cellular level, long before a high fasting blood sugar reading ever appears on a standard lab test. Now, catching a general post-meal spike is one thing, but when that spike happens and how long it hangs in your bloodstream turns out to matter a lot more than most people realize. If there was one specific finding that consistently made me slow down during chart analysis, it was delayed nighttime glucose plateaus, especially when they occurred after a supposedly clean evening meal. These spikes don't shoot up and drop down rapidly, they don't wave a red flag at you, they blend into your sleep cycle, they are almost camouflaged, and if you're not meticulous, if you don't check the data 3 to 4 hours post-dinner and examine the overnight trend line where the metabolism should be resting, they can be completely missed. And here's the part that surprises people. An organic, gluten-free evening carb isn't safer just because it sounds healthy. Why does this matter? Because overnight metabolic stress is far more likely to be missed and far more likely to cause severe organ damage before it's diagnosed. Human observational studies published in journals like Diabetes Care have shown that so-called interval metabolic complications, which are cardiovascular events diagnosed in people who had completely normal daytime finger prick tests, are disproportionately caused by these hidden overnight sugar plateaus. This isn't about fear, it's about respecting biology and being thorough. But not everything that I saw was subtle or hard to find. Some of the most common, most in-your-face findings were also the most preventable. Dawn phenomenon morning spikes, massive ones. When I saw fasting blood sugars leaping to a 115 or 120 first thing in the morning, even after a patient fasted for 12 hours, the explanation was usually straightforward. This is what happens in a population that is chronically muscle-starved and sleep-deprived. By best estimates, over 80% of adults do not meet the basic requirements for lean muscle mass preservation or daily movement. And the consequences, unfortunately, are entirely predictable. Less glucose clearance capacity, smaller cellular storage tanks, higher liver glycogen dumping, and elevated morning cortisol. All of these things slam the brakes on your metabolism. Morning sugar spikes can cause stubborn weight gain, intense carb cravings, chronic lethargy, and systemic inflammation. I don't think you need me to tell you this. You don't want to have those problems. Human interventional studies going back decades have shown that increasing lean muscle tissue through basic resistance movement reduces post-meal insulin requirements instantly. In fact, a meta-analysis looking at post-meal movement found that a simple 10-minute walk within 30 minutes of eating reduced the total glycemic area under the curve by about 30% to 50% compared to sitting still. One of the challenges with telling people to just lower their blood sugar, though, is that not all metabolic profiles are the same, and highly restrictive diets are rarely well tolerated over time. The challenge, how to support cellular insulin sensitivity without inducing starvation, stress, or extreme dietary restriction, is part of what led me to focus intensely on advanced food sequencing, metabolic restoration, rather than raw symptom suppression. When blood sugar numbers become chronically erratic, people often reach for instant solutions that promise quick relief. And sometimes the daily glucose log tells us exactly how that story is unfolded. Sometimes during chart analysis, a patient's log looks beautifully flat, almost artificially perfect, yet their cellular health tells a completely different story. They show me a string of 95 milligrams DL readings, but their actual cellular energy is crashing, and that finding is what we call false stability through starvation. It's a coping mechanism. It doesn't cause immediate panic symptoms, and it looks great to an untrained eye. Thank goodness. But it does tell a story. This artificial flatness is classically associated with extreme unsustainable low-carbohydrate starvation or over-reliance on herbal extracts like unchecked high-dose berberine supplements. These methods force blood glucose down temporarily, but over time they can come with severe trade-offs. If I had a choice, I would transition patients off these survival tactics when possible. And when we do, and fix the underlying cellular machinery, the true metabolic rhythm comes back naturally. But why stop these aggressive quick fixes if the low number looks good? Because raw symptom suppression via extreme deprivation has been associated in human studies with severe thyroid slowdown, elevated resting cortisol, muscle wasting, and intense rebound weight gain where weight management becomes impossible without starving yourself further. There is ongoing debate about whether long-term extreme carb deprivation permanently alters the body's ability to handle carbohydrates when they are eventually reintroduced. Some observational studies and tissue biopsies suggest possible down-regulation of glucose transporter cells, while others do not demonstrate clear permanent harm. So the science here is not entirely settled, and it's important to say that clearly. Still, this pattern, the false flatness of an over-restricted diet, signals symptom suppression without actually addressing the root cause, which is most commonly a loss of cellular insulin sensitivity driven by a lack of muscle-to-carb coordination. Not all metabolic injury is slow or silent. Sometimes the problem isn't the food moving into your stomach. It's how well your circulatory system is being supported. Another pattern I saw repeatedly was severe afternoon crashes exactly 3 hours after a high glycemic breakfast. Think about what happens to your cells. When a massive flood of fast carbohydrates hits your system, your pancreas panics, secreting an overwhelming wave of insulin. But because the cells are numb, the body overcompensates, dumping so much insulin into the bloodstream that your blood sugar doesn't just return to normal. It plummets entirely below baseline. Patients experience sudden shakiness, intense brain fog, and overwhelming sugar cravings. Human observational studies have shown that these reactive crashes frequently occur when highly refined carbohydrates are eaten completely naked, meaning without a protective buffer of protein, healthy fats, or organic acid. This finding reinforced something really important. Your metabolism is living tissue. It is completely dependent on food order, timing, and systemic cellular health. This is a friendly reminder that smart food sequencing is not optional for metabolic health. Order matters, timing matters, motility. The speed at which glucose enters your bloodstream is the rhythm. And when that rhythm breaks down, the effects on your long-term health are surprisingly devastating. There were times when patients followed standard dietary advice perfectly, eating small, frequent meals throughout the day, yet I still encountered a profound insulin burden during their clinical labs. They were not metabolically clear. They were experiencing what we call overflow hyperinsulinemia, where their blood sugar looked stable on a finger prick test, but behind the scenes, their pancreas was working 5 times harder than normal to keep it there. Their problem wasn't their food choices, it was severe hidden cellular resistance. Human kinetic studies show that constant snacking entirely eliminates the fasting windows your cells require to clean out metabolic waste and restore insulin sensitivity. Again, this isn't a personal failure, but it is biology responding to an unnatural environment. Seeing these findings once is interesting, but seeing them over and over again across thousands of data points changes how you see human health altogether. The most sobering pattern I kept seeing was this: young, outwardly healthy people with silent, creeping insulin resistance. Affluent, educated, active individuals who shop at high-end organic markets and exercise regularly. People you'd never look at and think something is wrong with their metabolism. They felt fine and they thought they were fine, and yet their cells were drowning in insulin. It taught me something fundamental. You cannot see metabolic health from the outside. Insulin resistance almost always starts quietly. No pain, no warning, until suddenly there are undeniable health consequences. All of this taught me an important lesson about what standard blood sugar testing can do, and just as importantly, what it can't. A single glucose reading is a snapshot. It shows the brief result of your immediate past choice. It does not measure your true cellular capacity directly. It does not predict your metabolic future with absolute certainty. But it gives us a chance to intervene early, a chance to change the direction, to change the entire outcome. After years of analyzing these glucose curves, what became crystal clear to me is that a standard blood sugar reading looks backward. It shows us the immediate result of past habits, exposures, and biology, but it doesn't automatically teach us how to live differently going forward. That gap between what we see on the meter and how we can actually change our internal biology is the exact reason we built the Sugar Fits Blueprint. It is built around the core idea that small, repeatable habits rooted in solid clinical science can meaningfully support your insulin sensitivity, protect your pancreas, and lower chronic cellular inflammation over time. Now, here's the hopeful part. Much of what I've described today is completely modifiable. Your daily habits, especially the sequence in which you eat your food and the timing of your movement, shape your glucose curves, shape your insulin requirements, your pancreatic health, and your long-term metabolic risk. And hey, even if you don't decide to download our tools, here's what I want you to know. Food order translates directly into metabolic freedom. You can get started right now by checking out my other video linked right here. It's about the exact 5-step food sequencing protocol that flattens sugar spikes by up to 70% without cutting a single carbohydrate from your plate. We can't control our genetics, but we are far from powerless. Your choices today shape what your metabolism looks like tomorrow, and that is where real hope lives. If you found this video to be helpful today, Consider subscribing to Sugar Fits for more science-backed metabolic tools and real-world information. And give this video a like, which helps it reach more people who can benefit from these data patterns. I'm Walter Berg, and I'll see you in the next video.